I thought Thanksgiving dinner would be the usual family gathering until my mother casually mentioned they had spent my entire $180,000 college fund on my sister's failed businesses. She passed the gravy boat while explaining that Amanda deserved the money more than I did. My father chimed in with his typical dismissive tone, saying it wasn't like I was going anywhere important anyway. The words hit me like a physical blow, but then something unexpected happened. My grandfather slowly rose from his chair at the head of the table, his weathered hands gripping the edge as his eyes fixed on my parents with an intensity I had never seen before. His voice cut through the sudden silence as he began to speak about where that money actually came from. Growing up in our suburban Chicago home, I always felt like I was living in Amanda's shadow. She was 3 years older and seemed to effortlessly capture every ounce of our parents' attention and affection. While I struggled through elementary school with undiagnosed learning difficulties, Amanda was the golden child who excelled at everything she touched. Her birthday parties were elaborate affairs with professional entertainers and expensive decorations, while mine were simple cake and ice cream gatherings with a few neighborhood kids. When Amanda expressed interest in music, our parents immediately enrolled her in private violin lessons with the city's most prestigious instructor. The weekly sessions cost $200 each, but they never hesitated to write the check. Meanwhile, I begged for months to join the school's robotics club, only to be told we couldn't afford the $50 participation fee. Amanda received a brand new violin worth $3,000 for her 13th birthday, while I got a used bicycle from a garage sale for mine. The pattern continued through high school. Amanda attended expensive summer camps for aspiring musicians and artists, while I worked construction jobs alongside my Uncle Robert to earn spending money. She received a new wardrobe each school year, complete with designer jeans and name-brand sneakers. I wore hand-me-downs from cousins and clearance items from discount stores. When it came time for college visits, our parents drove Amanda to prestigious universities across the country, staying in nice hotels and eating at fancy restaurants. For my college search, they handed me a stack of brochures and told me to figure it out myself. Despite these challenges, I maintained excellent grades and earned a partial academic scholarship to Northwestern University. I assumed our family's college fund was modest, perhaps $10,000 or $15,000 at most, based on how frugally my parents claimed to live. They constantly complained about money, refusing to buy name-brand groceries or update our aging appliances. Every family expense seemed to cause stress and arguments between my parents about our tight budget. During college, I worked 3 part-time jobs to cover my living expenses and student loan payments. I delivered pizzas on weeknights, worked retail on weekends, and tutored struggling students whenever possible. My typical day began at 6 in the morning, with classes continued with afternoon tutoring sessions, and ended with pizza deliveries until midnight. I survived on instant noodles and peanut butter sandwiches, often going days without a proper meal to save money for textbooks and supplies. Meanwhile, Amanda launched her first entrepreneurial venture during my sophomore year. She opened a boutique clothing store in downtown Evanston, specializing in vintage-inspired pieces for young professionals. Our parents raved about her business acumen and vision for success. They frequently posted photos on social media of Amanda in her stylishly decorated store, surrounded by carefully curated merchandise and trendy displays. The boutique failed within 8 months. Amanda blamed the location, claiming foot traffic was insufficient despite her market research. Our parents consoled her, explaining that most new businesses face challenges and that her next venture would surely succeed. They covered the remaining lease payments and helped her liquidate the inventory without any apparent financial strain. 6 months later, Amanda opened an organic juice bar near Northwestern's campus. She invested in expensive cold press equipment and hired a nutritionist to develop signature blends. The grand opening featured local influencers and health-conscious celebrities, generating significant buzz on social media platforms. Our parents attended the event beaming with pride, as Amanda gave interviews to food bloggers and lifestyle magazines. The juice bar lasted 14 months before closing, due to high overhead cost and seasonal fluctuations in customer demand. Again, our parents supported Amanda through the closure, helping her negotiate with suppliers and landlords to minimize financial losses. They explained that entrepreneurship requires persistence, and that successful business owners learn from each failure. Amanda's third attempt involved social media consulting for small businesses. She completed an expensive certification program and rented office space in a trendy co-working facility. Her client list included local restaurants, fitness studios, and professional service providers seeking to expand their online presence. Our parents praised her pivot into the digital marketing space, calling it a smart adaptation to changing business trends. This venture struggled for 18 months before Amanda admitted defeat. She blamed algorithm changes on social platforms and increased competition from larger marketing agencies. Our parents remained supportive, suggesting she take time to reassess her goals and explore new opportunities. Throughout Amanda's various business attempts, I continued grinding through my accounting degree while working multiple jobs. I graduated with honors despite my exhausting schedule, immediately landing a position as a junior accountant at a mid-sized firm in downtown Chicago. My starting salary allowed me to rent a small studio apartment and begin aggressively paying down my student loans. As I sat at that Thanksgiving table listening to my mother casually discuss spending my college fund, memories flooded back of every sacrifice I had made. Every night I chose work over social activities, every meal I skipped to save money, every time I walked to campus in freezing rain because I couldn't afford parking passes. The revelation that a substantial college fund had existed all along felt like a cruel joke. But then came the twist that changed everything. After our parents finished explaining their decision, Amanda shifted uncomfortably in her chair and avoided my gaze. Her reaction seemed strange for someone who supposedly benefited from their choice. When I pressed her about the timeline of these business investments, she stammered and looked desperately at our parents for guidance. That's when I realized Amanda knew exactly where the money had come from and had been receiving it all along. The designer handbags she carried, the luxury car she drove, the expensive apartment she rented in Lincoln Park. It all suddenly made perfect sense. While I was eating ramen noodles and working night shifts, my sister was living comfortably on money that was meant for my education. After dinner, I cornered Amanda in the kitchen while she loaded the dishwasher. Her hands trembled as she arranged plates in the lower rack, and she refused to make eye contact with me. The confident entrepreneurial facade she had maintained throughout dinner completely crumbled when we were alone together. "Amanda, we need to talk about this college fund situation," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "How long have you known where that money really came from?" She dropped a wine glass and it shattered across the tile floor. As she knelt to collect the pieces, tears began streaming down her face. "Jeffrey, please don't hate me," she whispered. "I never wanted any of this to happen. They told me it was their retirement money that they were choosing to help me instead of saving for their old age." Over the next hour, Amanda revealed the full extent of our parents' manipulation. She showed me bank statements on her phone documenting monthly transfers of $7,500 over the past 24 months. The money had funded far more than just business ventures. It had subsidized her entire lifestyle while I struggled to survive on my own. She had used the funds to secure a lease on a luxury yoga studio in River North, complete with heated floors and high-end equipment worth $40,000. When the studio failed to attract sufficient membership, she spent additional money on expensive marketing consultants who promised to revolutionize her business model through targeted social media campaigns and influencer partnerships. The money had also paid for Amanda's professional wardrobe, which she claimed was essential for networking events and client meetings. She had spent thousands of dollars on designer suits, luxury handbags, and premium skincare products to maintain what she called her executive image. Her apartment deposit alone had cost $8,000 plus first and last month's rent in one of Chicago's most desirable neighborhoods. Amanda revealed that our parents had been systematically poisoning her against me for years, suggesting that I was selfish and ungrateful for not supporting family business ventures. They convinced her that successful families invest in each other, and that my focus on individual achievement demonstrated a lack of loyalty to our shared values. They made me feel guilty every time I questioned the expenses, Amanda sobbed. They said you were too proud to accept help and that this was the only way to ensure both of us had opportunities for success. They claimed you would refuse the money if you knew it existed, so they decided to invest it more strategically. As Amanda continued her confession, my stomach dropped further. Our parents had remortgaged the family home to cover their own living expenses, using the equity to maintain their lifestyle while depleting my college fund. They had planned to declare bankruptcy within the next year and blame our family's financial ruin on my selfishness and lack of support for Amanda's entrepreneurial efforts. They have a whole story prepared, Amanda whispered. They were going to tell everyone that you refused to help your sister during her time of need and that your coldness drove the family to financial destruction. They wanted to make you the villain while they played the role of suffering parents who sacrificed everything for their ungrateful children. But the revelation that truly shattered my world came when Amanda showed me additional documents on her laptop. Our parents had been using my personal information to apply for credit cards and loans throughout my college years, systematically destroying my credit score while I remained completely unaware. They had opened accounts in my name and linked them to Amanda's business expenses, creating a paper trail that would make me liable for her debts. The credit applications used my social security number and forged my signature on dozens of documents. They had listed me as a co-signer for Amanda's business loans, equipment leases, and commercial real estate agreements. If any of these ventures failed, which they all had, I would be legally responsible for hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. Amanda showed me emails between our parents and various business creditors discussing payment plans and debt restructuring options that would ultimately fall on my shoulders. They had created a financial house of cards with my identity as the foundation, ensuring that any collapse would destroy my future while protecting their own assets. Jeffrey, I swear I didn't know about the identity theft until last week, Amanda cried. I found these documents when I was helping Mom organize her filing cabinet. That's when I realized how deep this goes and why they've been so confident about the bankruptcy plan. The web of deception extended beyond financial fraud. Our parents had been telling extended family members that I was struggling with substance abuse and had become estranged from the family due to my erratic behavior. This explained why aunts, uncles, and cousins had been treating me with increased distance and concern during recent gatherings. They had also contacted my employer, claiming to be worried about my mental health and asking about employee assistance programs for troubled workers. Fortunately, my supervisor had dismissed their concerns as family drama, but the attempted interference in my professional life demonstrated how far they were willing to go to control the narrative. Amanda revealed that our parents had convinced her that I resented her success and was planning to sabotage her business ventures out of jealousy. They claimed I had made threatening comments about her future and suggested that she needed to protect herself by accepting their financial support and maintaining distance from me. The psychological manipulation had been incredibly effective. Amanda genuinely believed she was protecting both herself and our family by accepting the money and keeping secrets about its source. Our parents had created an environment of fear and mistrust that prevented Amanda and me from communicating openly about what was happening. As Amanda shared more details about the deception, I realized that our parents had been planning this systematic theft for years. They had carefully positioned themselves as trustees of my college fund, while simultaneously building a case for why I didn't deserve the money. They had documented every instance of my independence and self-reliance as evidence of ingratitude and family disloyalty. The most devastating twist came when Amanda showed me correspondence with our family's accountant, Harold Morrison, who had been pressured to falsify tax documents and investment statements. Harold had tried to contact me directly several times over the past year, but our parents had intercepted his calls and emails, claiming they would handle any financial communications on my behalf. Harold's messages revealed that my grandfather's lawyer had also been trying to reach me for months regarding irregularities in the college fund administration. Our parents had blocked these communications as well, creating a barrier between me and anyone who might expose their fraud. Amanda broke down completely as she realized the full scope of our parents' betrayal. "They used me to hurt you," she whispered. "Everything I thought I was building was just a lie to steal your future. I feel so stupid and ashamed." The kitchen conversation lasted until nearly 2 in the morning, with Amanda revealing layer after layer of deception that our parents had orchestrated. By the time we finished talking, it was clear that this went far beyond simple favoritism or poor financial decisions. Our parents had committed serious crimes and were prepared to destroy both of their children to protect themselves from consequences. The next morning, I drove to my grandfather Frank's house in Oak Park, desperate for answers and hoping he might provide clarity about the college fund situation. Frank lived in the same craftsman-style home where he had raised my father, a modest but well-maintained property surrounded by mature oak trees and carefully tended flower beds. I found him in his study surrounded by filing cabinets and legal documents spread across his massive mahogany desk. At 78 years old, Frank remained sharp and methodical, approaching every problem with the precision of someone who had spent 40 years as a civil engineer. He looked up from his paperwork with knowing eyes as if he had been expecting my visit. "Jeffrey, sit down," he said, gesturing to the leather chair across from his desk. "I think it's time you learned the truth about that college fund and a few other things your parents have been hiding from you." Frank opened a manila folder and pulled out documents that looked official and important. He explained that he had established my college fund on the day I was born, not my parents'. The initial deposit of $50,000 had been invested in conservative mutual funds and treasury bonds designed to grow steadily over 25 years. "Your parents were named as trustees, not owners," Frank clarified, showing me the original legal paperwork. "They had authority to manage the investments but were legally required to use the money solely for your educational expenses. The fund was meant to reach approximately $200,000 by your 25th birthday." Frank had been receiving quarterly statements from the investment company for over 2 decades, carefully monitoring the fund's performance and growth. Everything appeared normal until 18 months ago, when he noticed irregular withdrawal patterns and concerning transaction descriptions. The withdrawals were labeled as educational expenses, but the amounts and timing didn't make sense, Frank explained. "Why would you need $15,000 for textbooks in July when you had already graduated? Why were there multiple payments to businesses that had nothing to do with education?" Concerned about the suspicious activity, Frank had hired a private investigator named Sarah Chen to examine the fund's usage and investigate my parents' financial activities. Sarah's initial report revealed systematic misuse of trust funds and potential identity theft, prompting Frank to engage a lawyer and expand the investigation. "Jeffrey, what I'm about to tell you might be difficult to process," Frank said solemnly. "The college fund was just one part of a much larger inheritance I established for you. Your grandmother and I created a trust worth approximately $500,000, including this house investment accounts and a life insurance policy." Frank showed me documents detailing the full trust structure, including property deeds, investment portfolios, and insurance policies. My parents had been systematically stealing from multiple accounts, falsifying documents and redirecting assets intended for my benefit. The investigation had uncovered evidence that my parents planned to claim I had died in a car accident, allowing them to collect life insurance proceeds and claim the remaining trust assets. They had already obtained fake death certificates and were working with corrupt officials to establish the necessary paperwork for insurance claims. "They purchased life insurance policies on you without your knowledge," Frank revealed, showing me application documents with my forged signature. "The policies are worth over $200,000 and name your parents as beneficiaries. They planned to stage your death and disappear with the insurance money plus any remaining trust assets." Frank's private investigator had documented communications between my parents and individuals involved in insurance fraud schemes. They had researched methods for faking accidental deaths and had made contact with people experienced in creating false documentation and establishing new identities. The planned timeline was aggressive and immediate. My parents intended to execute their scheme within the next 6 weeks, claiming I had been killed in a car accident while traveling for work. They had already prepared obituaries, funeral arrangements, and legal documents needed to settle my estate quickly. "The investigation also revealed that your parents have been running similar schemes in other states," Frank continued. "They established false identities and created fake family relationships to gain access to trust funds and inheritance money belonging to other families. Frank showed me FBI reports documenting a multi-state fraud operation involving my parents and a network of accomplices. They had targeted elderly individuals with substantial assets, gaining their trust through fake relationships, and then systematically stealing their money through fraudulent legal documents and financial manipulation. Your father has used at least 4 different names over the past decade, Frank explained. Your mother has 3 documented aliases. They've been operating in Illinois, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Indiana, targeting families with significant inheritance assets. The scope of their criminal enterprise was staggering. Frank's investigation had identified at least 12 other victims, including elderly couples who lost their life savings and young adults whose trust funds were stolen through fake guardianship arrangements. They've perfected a system of identifying vulnerable targets and establishing fake family connections to gain legal access to their assets, Frank said. Once they control the money, they systematically drain the accounts and move to new locations with fresh identities. Frank revealed that my parents had been planning to abandon Amanda as well, leaving her to face criminal charges for money laundering and business fraud. They had structured her business arrangements to make her legally liable for their crimes while protecting themselves through shell corporations and false documentation. Amanda was never their daughter in this scheme, Frank explained. She was another victim they planned to sacrifice when law enforcement inevitably caught up with their activities. They were using her as a shield to deflect attention from their real crimes. The revelation that my parents were career criminals operating a sophisticated fraud network explained their confident demeanor during the Thanksgiving confrontation. They believed they had sufficient legal protection and escape plans to avoid consequences for their actions. Frank showed me evidence that my parents had already purchased property in Costa Rica and established bank accounts under their false identities. They planned to flee the country immediately after collecting the insurance money from my staged death, leaving Amanda to face prosecution for crimes she didn't knowingly commit. Jeffrey, I need you to understand how serious this situation is, Frank said urgently. These people aren't just greedy relatives who made poor choices. They're dangerous criminals who have been planning to destroy your life for their financial benefit. We need to involve law enforcement immediately before they realize their scheme has been exposed. As Frank compiled the evidence and prepared to contact authorities, I struggled to process the magnitude of my parents' betrayal. Everything I believed about my family had been a carefully constructed lie designed to position me as a victim of their criminal enterprise. The college fund theft was just the beginning of a plan that would have ended with my death and the complete destruction of my identity and future. My parents had been willing to murder their own son to protect their criminal operation and fund their escape from justice. The next morning, Frank arranged for me to meet with his private investigator, Sarah Chen, and lawyer Marcus Thompson at their downtown Chicago offices. The conference room walls were covered with charts, photographs, and financial documents detailing my parents' criminal activities spanning multiple states and involving dozens of victims. Sarah, a former FBI agent with 20 years of experience in financial crimes, walked me through the investigation's findings with methodical precision. She had been tracking my parents' activities for 8 months, uncovering a sophisticated criminal enterprise that extended far beyond the theft of my college fund. Your parents operate under a network of false identities, each carefully constructed with supporting documentation, including birth certificates, social security numbers, and employment histories. Sarah explained, pointing to a chart showing their various aliases. They've been running inheritance fraud schemes for at least 15 years, targeting families with substantial trust funds and estate assets. The investigation revealed that my father had established fake businesses using my personal information, creating a paper trail that would make me responsible for hundreds of thousands of dollars in fraudulent transactions. These businesses included construction companies, consulting firms, and real estate investment groups that existed only on paper, but generated significant debt in my name. They've been filing tax returns under your identity for the past 5 years, claiming false dependents and business deductions that could result in serious federal charges against you. Marcus added, showing me IRS documents with my forged signature. The tax fraud alone could result in criminal prosecution and substantial financial penalties. Sarah's investigation had uncovered evidence that my parents were planning to flee to Costa Rica within the next 3 weeks, immediately after executing their plan to stage my accidental death. They had already transferred significant assets to offshore accounts and purchased property in a region known for harboring American fugitives. They've been in communication with individuals who specialize in creating new identities for people fleeing law enforcement, Sarah continued. These contacts have provided them with detailed instructions for establishing new lives under completely different names. The most shocking revelation was that my parents had been systematically poisoning Amanda's food with small amounts of prescription medication, causing the anxiety and depression that led to her business failures and increased dependence on their financial support. They had been slowly destroying her mental health to ensure she remained vulnerable to their manipulation. Amanda's medical records show unexplained symptoms consistent with benzodiazepine poisoning over the past 2 years, Marcus explained. The dosages were carefully calculated to impair her judgment and decision-making abilities without causing obvious medical emergencies. This explained Amanda's erratic behavior during her business ventures and her inability to make sound financial decisions despite her intelligence and education. Our parents had been chemically sabotaging her cognitive abilities to ensure their schemes remained undetected. Sarah showed me surveillance footage from Amanda's apartment building, documenting my parents entering her unit multiple times when she was away. They had been accessing her living space to contaminate her food and medication, monitor her communications, and plant evidence that would implicate her in their crimes. They've been setting Amanda up to take responsibility for money laundering and business fraud charges, Sarah explained. Her compromised mental state would make it difficult for her to defend herself effectively in court, while your parents' carefully constructed alibis would protect them from prosecution. The investigation had also revealed that my parents staged a fake medical emergency last year, creating a GoFundMe campaign, claiming I was in a coma following a serious car accident. They collected over $50,000 in donations from community members, extended family, and friends who believed they were helping with my medical expenses. The fraudulent fundraising campaign included fake medical documents, staged hospital photographs, and detailed updates about your fictional recovery process. Marcus showed me printed copies of the online campaign. They maintained this deception for 3 months while you were actually working full-time and completely unaware of their activities. Extended family members had contributed thousands of dollars to support my fictional medical treatment, believing they were helping during a family crisis. Co-workers had organized additional fundraising events, and my employer had even provided paid leave for family members to care for me during my supposed recovery. Your parents documented every donation and created detailed records showing how the money was allegedly spent on medical bills and rehabilitation costs, Sarah explained. This evidence would have supported their claim that they had legitimate reasons for accessing your trust fund and using your identity for financial transactions. The investigation team had identified at least 47 people who contributed to the fraudulent campaign, including elderly relatives who depleted their savings to help with my fictional medical emergency. The emotional impact on these victims would be devastating once they learned the truth about my parents' deception. Sarah revealed that my parents had been monitoring my communications and tracking my location through spyware installed on my phone and laptop. They knew details about my work schedule, personal relationships, and financial situation that they used to time their fraudulent activities and avoid detection. They've been reading your text messages, emails, and monitoring your bank account activity for over 2 years, Sarah explained. This surveillance allowed them to stay ahead of any potential discovery of their crimes while gathering information they could use to further implicate you in their schemes. The spyware also allowed my parents to intercept communications from Frank's lawyer and the trust fund administrator who had been trying to contact me about irregularities in account management. They had been blocking these messages while creating fake responses that delayed any investigation into their activities. Marcus showed me evidence that my parents had been in contact with criminal organizations that specialize in identity theft and financial fraud. These groups had provided them with sophisticated tools and techniques for creating false documentation and avoiding law enforcement detection. The level of coordination and planning involved in this operation indicates your parents are part of a larger criminal network with resources and expertise that extend far beyond simple family financial abuse. Marcus explained. We're dealing with organized crime that happens to involve your biological parents. As the briefing continued, Sarah revealed that FBI investigators had been quietly building cases against multiple members of this criminal network. My parents' activities had attracted federal attention, and law enforcement agencies were preparing to execute coordinated arrests across several states. The timing of your grandfather's decision to expose them at Thanksgiving dinner may have prevented them from disappearing before law enforcement could apprehend them, Sarah concluded. If they had successfully staged your death and fled the country, it might have taken years to track them down and recover assets stolen from their many victims. The evidence compiled by Frank's investigation team would be crucial for federal prosecutors building cases against my parents and their criminal associates. My cooperation as a victim and witness would help ensure maximum sentences and asset recovery for all affected families. 2 days later, I worked with Marcus and Sarah to organize a family gathering that would serve as both a confrontation and evidence-gathering opportunity for law enforcement. We planned the event at Frank's house, inviting extended family members who had been victims of my parents' various fraud schemes over the years. I reached out to aunts, uncles, and cousins explaining that Frank wanted to host an early Christmas celebration with important family announcements. Most relatives eagerly accepted, excited about the prospect of a large family gathering during the holiday season. Amanda agreed to cooperate after learning the full extent of our parents' manipulation and criminal activities. The medical evidence of her systematic poisoning had shocked her into recognizing that she had been a victim rather than a willing accomplice in their schemes. Jeffrey, I'm terrified about facing everyone, Amanda confided as we prepared for the gathering. How do I explain that I unknowingly helped steal from our own family? How do I apologize for being so blind to what was really happening? I assured her that the family would understand her situation once they learned about the psychological and chemical manipulation she had endured. The important thing was her willingness to help expose the truth and cooperate with law enforcement to ensure justice. Frank's house filled with relatives throughout the afternoon, including Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia from Milwaukee, cousin Michael and his wife from Indianapolis, and various other family members who had maintained relationships with my parents over the years. The atmosphere was festive and warm, with everyone looking forward to Frank's promised announcements. My parents arrived fashionably late, carrying expensive wine and elaborate flower arrangements that demonstrated their continued access to substantial financial resources. They appeared confident and relaxed, treating the gathering as another opportunity to maintain their carefully constructed facade of successful, generous family members. Mom wore a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, while Dad sported a luxury watch and custom suit that reinforced their image of prosperity and success. They moved through the room, greeting relatives with the practiced charm of experienced con artists. "Jeffrey, darling, you look wonderful," Mom said, kissing my cheek with the same artificial affection she had displayed during Thanksgiving dinner. "I'm so glad we could all come together for this special celebration." Dad clapped me on the shoulder with false paternal warmth, asking about my work and expressing pride in my accounting career. Their performance was flawless, giving no indication that they were aware of any problems or concerns about their recent revelations regarding the college fund. As the afternoon progressed, I felt increasingly anxious about the confrontation ahead. These were people I had known my entire life, relatives who had celebrated my birthdays, attended my graduation, and offered support during difficult times. The thought of revealing their systematic betrayal felt overwhelming. Marcus arrived discreetly through Frank's back entrance, positioning himself in the study with recording equipment and legal documents needed to document the proceedings. Sarah coordinated with local law enforcement to ensure backup would be available if the situation became volatile or dangerous. At 6 o'clock, Frank called everyone into the living room for his promised announcement. Relatives gathered on sofas and chairs, holding cups of coffee and plates of dessert, expecting to hear about estate planning or family traditions. "Thank you all for joining us today." Frank began, his voice steady but serious. "I've asked you here because we need to address some important family matters that have recently come to light. What I'm about to share will be difficult to hear, but it's essential that everyone understands what's been happening in our family. The room fell silent as relatives sensed the gravity of Frank's tone. My parents maintained their composed expressions, but I noticed Mom's hand tightening on her wine glass and Dad shifting uncomfortably in his chair. Frank began by explaining the true structure of my college fund and trust inheritance, detailing how my parents had systematically stolen money intended for my education and future security. He presented bank statements, legal documents, and investment records that clearly showed unauthorized withdrawals and fraudulent transactions. The college fund established for Jeffrey contained $180,000 that was meant solely for his educational expenses. Frank explained, his voice growing stronger as he continued. That money was stolen and used to fund business ventures that were designed to fail while providing cover for money laundering activities. Uncle Robert, a retired police detective, immediately understood the implications of Frank's presentation. He began asking pointed questions about documentation and evidence, his professional instincts recognizing the signs of serious criminal activity. Frank, are you telling us that Jeffrey's parents have been committing fraud using family trust funds? Robert asked directly, his eyes moving between Frank and my parents with increasing suspicion. Before Frank could respond, Dad attempted to control the narrative by standing and dismissing the accusations as misunderstandings and family jealousy. "This is ridiculous," he declared. "Frank has been confused about financial matters for years, and Jeffrey is just upset that we made practical decisions about family resources." Mom joined the defensive effort, claiming that they had used the money responsibly to help Amanda establish herself professionally, and that any irregularities in documentation were simply administrative errors. "We did what any loving parents would do," Mom insisted. "We invested in our daughter's future and helped her build a foundation for success. Jeffrey has always been independent and capable of handling his own financial responsibilities." But Frank was prepared for their denials. He produced additional evidence that stunned the entire room: documents showing that my parents had been stealing from other relatives as well, including Aunt Patricia's missing jewelry, false insurance claims involving Uncle Robert's property, and fraudulent credit applications using Cousin Michael's identity. "Patricia, do you remember the diamond earrings that disappeared from your purse during last year's family reunion?" Frank asked quietly. "They were pawned 3 days later by someone using false identification with your son's name." Aunt Patricia gasped and looked around the room in confusion. "Those earrings were my mother's. I thought I had misplaced them. You're saying they were stolen?" The revelation that their crimes extended beyond my situation created immediate chaos in the room. Relatives began comparing notes about missing items, unexplained credit inquiries, and suspicious financial activities they had previously attributed to coincidence or misunderstanding. Then came the twist that completely shattered my parents' facade. Frank revealed the existence of my half-brother Jake, Dad's son, from a previous relationship whom none of us had ever met or known about. Jake had been living homeless for 6 months because my parents had been stealing from his trust fund while convincing his mother they were providing for his living expenses. Jake is 23 years old and has been surviving on the streets while his father and stepmother live in luxury, using money that was meant to support his education and housing. Frank announced, his voice filled with disgust. The room erupted as relatives realized the scope of my parents' deception and cruelty. Uncle Robert immediately called for police backup, while other family members began documenting evidence with their phones and demanding explanations. My parents' carefully maintained composure finally cracked as they realized their schemes had been completely exposed and that law enforcement was being involved. Mom began crying and blaming Dad for forcing her participation, while Dad accused Frank of orchestrating a family conspiracy against them. "This is all lies and manipulation," Dad shouted. "Frank has been jealous of our success and turned Jeffrey against us with these ridiculous accusations. We're the victims here, not the criminals." But their desperate attempts at deflection were too late. Uncle Robert's law enforcement contacts arrived within minutes, and the evening ended with my parents being arrested on charges of fraud, identity theft, and money laundering, while our extended family watched in shock and disbelief. The arrest of my parents triggered a rapid sequence of legal proceedings that unfolded over the following weeks. Federal investigators moved quickly to freeze their bank accounts and prevent them from accessing assets hidden in offshore accounts or fleeing to Costa Rica as originally planned. Marcus coordinated with federal prosecutors to ensure that all evidence collected by Frank's investigation team was properly documented and admissible in court. The private investigation had provided law enforcement with a comprehensive foundation for building strong cases against my parents and their criminal associates. Within 48 hours of their arrest, emergency court hearings were scheduled to address the immediate needs of victims and prevent further financial damage. I worked closely with bank representatives and credit agencies to freeze fraudulent accounts opened in my name and begin the process of restoring my damaged credit history. The court appointed me as temporary guardian of family assets to prevent further theft or destruction of evidence. This responsibility included securing the family home, which was in foreclosure due to my parents' financial manipulation, and protecting any remaining trust fund assets from their creditors. Amanda entered a residential treatment program to address the psychological trauma and chemical poisoning she had endured over the past 2 years. Medical professionals confirmed that her anxiety and depression symptoms were consistent with systematic benzodiazepine exposure supporting the criminal charges against our parents. Extended family members rallied around both Amanda and our newly discovered half-brother Jake, who emerged from homelessness to join the growing circle of our parents' victims seeking justice and recovery. Jake moved into Frank's house temporarily while beginning community college courses with financial support from recovered trust fund assets. "I thought my father had abandoned me completely," Jake shared during one of our early conversations. "I never imagined he was actually stealing my support money while leaving me to survive on the streets. The betrayal is almost impossible to comprehend." The fraudulent GoFundMe campaign that had collected $50,000 for my fictional medical emergency created additional victims throughout our community. Neighbors, co-workers, and friends who had contributed their hard-earned money to help with my supposed recovery felt deeply betrayed and manipulated by my parents' deception. Community leaders organized support meetings for fraud victims, providing counseling resources and legal guidance for people seeking restitution. The emotional impact on elderly relatives who had depleted their savings to help with my fictional medical crisis was particularly devastating. Sarah's investigation expanded to include FBI agents working on related cases across multiple states. The evidence collected about my parents' activities helped identify patterns and connections that strengthened ongoing prosecutions of their criminal associates and other fraud schemes. Your parents were significant players in a sophisticated criminal network that has been operating for over a decade. FBI Special Agent Jennifer Walsh explained during one of our interviews. Their cooperation or lack thereof will significantly impact sentencing for all network members. The discovery of property purchased in Costa Rica with stolen trust fund money led to international cooperation between U.S. and Central American law enforcement agencies. Assets hidden in foreign accounts were frozen and marked for recovery as restitution for victims. Marcus filed civil lawsuits on behalf of all identified victims seeking recovery of stolen assets, plus damages for the emotional and financial harm caused by my parents' crimes. The lawsuits included claims against financial institutions and businesses that had facilitated their fraudulent activities. The civil cases will take longer to resolve than the criminal proceedings, Marcus explained, but they're essential for ensuring maximum recovery of stolen assets and holding all responsible parties accountable for their roles in these crimes. Media coverage of the case attracted attention from investigative journalists and documentary filmmakers interested in exploring the psychology and methodology of family financial fraud. The scope and sophistication of my parents' criminal enterprise made it a compelling case study for understanding organized fraud operations. 3 months after their arrest, my parents were offered plea agreements that would require them to provide complete cooperation in prosecuting their criminal associates and recovering assets stolen from all victims. Their decision whether to accept these agreements would determine their ultimate sentences and the speed of victim restitution. If they cooperate fully, they'll receive 15 to 20-year sentences, FBI Agent Walsh informed me. If they refused to cooperate or continue lying about their activities, they could face life imprisonment under federal racketeering statutes. The plea negotiations revealed additional information about my parents' criminal activities, including their involvement in elder abuse schemes targeting nursing home residents and insurance fraud operations involving staged accidents and fake disability claims. Amanda's recovery progressed steadily as the medications cleared her system and she began processing the trauma of her manipulation and abuse. She started developing plans for legitimate business ventures using recovered trust fund money and her newfound understanding of ethical business practices. "I want to use my experience to help other fraud victims," Amanda shared. "I understand how manipulation works because I lived it. Maybe I can help people recognize the signs and avoid becoming victims themselves." Jake excelled in his community college courses while working part-time at a local nonprofit organization that assisted homeless individuals with housing and employment services. His first-hand experience with homelessness and financial fraud made him an effective advocate for other victims. Frank's health improved dramatically as the stress of concealing his knowledge about my parents' crimes was lifted. He began working with attorneys to establish stronger legal protections for trust funds and inheritance assets to prevent similar fraud schemes in the future. "This experience has taught me that family relationships can be the most dangerous when they involve significant financial assets," Frank reflected. "We need better legal frameworks to protect beneficiaries from exploitation by trustees and family members." The investigation continued, uncovering new victims and evidence as federal agents followed leads provided by my parents' communications and financial records. The final scope of their criminal enterprise included dozens of families across 8 states and hundreds of thousands of dollars in stolen assets. 6 months after that devastating Thanksgiving dinner revelation, I stood in a federal courthouse watching my parents receive their sentences for crimes that had destroyed multiple families and shattered countless lives. They had ultimately refused the plea agreements, maintaining their innocence despite overwhelming evidence, and received the maximum sentences allowed under federal racketeering and fraud statutes. Mom was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison without possibility of parole for her leadership role in the criminal enterprise. Dad received 22 years for his extensive history of identity theft and fraud schemes, dating back over 15 years. Both would be well into their 70s before becoming eligible for release. The sentences provided a sense of justice, but the real satisfaction came from the recovery of stolen assets and the restoration of our family relationships. Federal investigators had located and seized over $420,000 in hidden accounts, recovered property, and liquidated assets purchased with stolen money. I received my original college fund amount plus accrued interest totaling $210,000, along with additional restitution for the damage to my credit and the fraudulent use of my identity. The recovered money allowed me to pay off my student loans completely and begin building the financial foundation that had been stolen from me. Using the recovered assets, I completed a graduate degree in forensic accounting, specializing in family financial fraud investigation and prevention. The program provided me with skills and knowledge that transformed my career while allowing me to help other victims of similar crimes. My new career path led to establishing a nonprofit organization called the Family Financial Protection Alliance, which provides education support and advocacy for victims of financial abuse by relatives and trusted family members. The organization offers free consultations, legal referrals, and emotional support for people navigating family fraud situations. Jeffrey's experience demonstrates that family financial fraud is far more common than most people realize, explained Dr. Michelle Roberts, a financial psychologist who serves on our organization's advisory board. Victims often struggle with shame and guilt because they feel they should have recognized the warning signs or protected themselves better. Amanda completed her recovery program and used her portion of recovered assets to start a legitimate consulting business focused on helping fraud victims rebuild their lives and finances. Her first-hand experience with manipulation and abuse made her uniquely qualified to understand the psychological aspects of financial victimization. "I spent 2 years believing I was an entrepreneur when I was actually just a money laundering operation," Amanda reflected during a conference presentation about our experience. Recovery required me to completely rebuild my understanding of legitimate business practices and ethical financial relationships. Jake graduated from community college with honors and received a full scholarship to Northwestern University's law school, where he plans to specialize in criminal justice and victim advocacy. His experience with homelessness and financial fraud motivated him to pursue a career protecting vulnerable populations from exploitation. "I want to ensure that other people don't fall through the cracks the way I did," Jake explained during his scholarship interview. "The legal system needs advocates who understand what it's like to be completely abandoned and betrayed by the people who should protect you." Frank's health continued improving as he found purpose in mentoring other elderly individuals about protecting their assets from family fraud schemes. He established a speakers bureau that provides education to senior centers' estate planning attorneys and financial advisors about recognizing and preventing family financial abuse. The family home was saved from foreclosure using recovered assets and converted into a transitional housing facility for fraud victims who need temporary shelter while rebuilding their lives. The property provides safe, affordable housing for up to 8 families while they work with legal advocates and financial counselors. Extended family relationships grew stronger as relatives processed their shared experience of victimization and recovery. Uncle Robert used his law enforcement background to advocate for stronger fraud prevention measures, while Aunt Patricia became a volunteer counselor for elderly fraud victims. This experience taught us that family loyalty means protecting each other from harm, not enabling destructive behavior. Uncle Robert observed during a family gathering celebrating Jake's college graduation. "Real love sometimes requires difficult conversations and tough decisions. My personal relationships also flourished as I learned to trust people again and recognize healthy relationship patterns. I met Sarah Martinez, a paralegal who had worked on my case during a victim advocacy conference, where we were both presenting about our experiences with family financial fraud. Sarah understood the complexities of rebuilding trust after family betrayal because she had helped dozens of fraud victims navigate similar healing processes. Our relationship developed slowly and carefully, based on mutual respect and shared commitment to helping other victims. Jeffrey's story shows that recovery from family financial fraud requires both legal justice and emotional healing," Sarah explained during a joint presentation we gave to law enforcement officers. "Victims need comprehensive support that addresses both the practical and psychological aspects of their experience." The annual scholarship ceremony for the Family Financial Protection Alliance has become a powerful reminder of how destructive family fraud can be transformed into positive change and community support. This year, we awarded scholarships to 12 young adults whose educational plans were disrupted by family financial fraud. Each scholarship recipient represents a family that refused to let criminal betrayal define their future possibilities. Their stories of resilience and determination inspire everyone involved in TSE fraud prevention and victim support community. My testimony before congressional committees examining trust fund fraud prevention led to new federal legislation requiring stronger oversight and reporting requirements for family trusts and inheritance accounts. The Jeffrey Protection Act mandates annual beneficiary notifications and independent monitoring of large trust fund withdrawals. Family financial fraud destroys more than just bank accounts, I told legislators during my testimony. It destroys trust relationships and faith in the institutions that are supposed to protect us. We need laws that recognize the unique vulnerabilities created by family relationships involving significant financial assets. The legislation also established federal funding for victim support services and created specialized prosecution units for family financial fraud cases. These resources will help future victims access the legal and emotional support they need to recover and rebuild their lives. Looking back on that Thanksgiving dinner when my world collapsed, I realize it was actually the beginning of discovering my real family among the people who supported me through crisis and recovery. Amanda, Jake, Frank, and our extended relatives proved that family is defined by love and protection, not biological connections or legal obligations. As I prepare for my wedding to Sarah next month, I'm grateful for the painful journey that led to this point. The betrayal and fraud revealed who my real family members are while providing me with a purpose and career that help other people navigate similar challenges. I learned that family isn't defined by blood or obligation, but by people who genuinely care about your well-being and growth. Real love doesn't manipulate or deceive. It protects and empowers. Sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is refusing to enable your destructive choices and instead holding you accountable to become better. The criminals who raised me taught me what family should never be. The people who supported me through recovery showed me what family truly means. That understanding has become the foundation for building genuine relationships based on honesty, respect, and mutual support. Have you ever experienced betrayal by someone you trusted completely, and how did you rebuild your ability to trust others? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help others find it. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming family challenges and share it with anyone who might benefit from hearing about recovery and resilience after betrayal. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I hope your own family relationships are built on the genuine love and protection that everyone deserves.